Hello everyone. Today we are building a beautiful travel website for Jaipur. Jaipur, also known as the Pink City of India, is famous for its spectacular forts and vibrant culture. The inspiration for this design came from the city's iconic pink color. So, if you are from Jaipur, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. And if you are new here, I'm Sashank and I teach web design and development with a focus on Tailwind CSS and Vue.js. If that catches your interest, don't forget to subscribe. Recently, I posted a video on creating a blog page using Tailwind CSS and it got a great response. I honestly did not expect that. Since many of you wanted more, I decided to continue this series. I will regularly post tutorials with different designs covering various genres so you can learn something new in each video. And I use only Tailwind CSS and nothing else. With careful planning, I ensure each design is unique, helping you get the hang of Tailwind CSS and create stunning designs on your own in no time. I also try to keep each tutorial 3 to 4 pages to prevent the videos from being too long and overwhelming. And if you want the code for free to use or modify, just follow the instructions in the description. Now, let me show you what we will be creating. We'll start with a simple landing page introducing Jaipur to users, featuring some historic spots on the right with some animation, and a navbar with some links and a CTA button, a call to action button. The second page showcases iconic locations to experience in Jaipur, and you have a hover effect for each location. You can see the name of that place on hover with some gradient background so that the text appears clear. And the last page, though simple, is very attractive. It provides just the right amount of information along with a footer offering tools for visitors and links to other destinations and some social media links. We also have a mobile and tablet versions for this design. So let's head to VS Code and let's build this project. Here I am in my blank Vue.js project. I have an empty app.vue, main.css with the Tailwind directives, main.js with the boilerplate code, and then Tailwind config with the boilerplate code for the Vue specific content. I'm using Vue just so that the files can be organized. It doesn't have to do anything with JavaScript or logic. Instead of keeping HTML which has all the code, I can just create a folder and create different components so that I can just keep the code organized. So you can use Vue if you want, you can use React, otherwise you can just use HTML. It doesn't matter. So let's create a folder, views, and I want to divide this into 3 sections. So first will be hero section, which has its images, the heading, and also the navbar. Then we will have the discover section where we saw the iconic locations with some hover effect. And then the last would be a subscribe section where user can subscribe to the updates and also the footer of that website. So let's create hero section. Then let's create the discover section. And subscribe section. Now let's import them in the app.vue. And now let's use them in the template section. I'll create a main container. In that there will be hero section, then the discover section, and then the subscribe section. Now let's run the project by typing the command npm run dev. Let's open this link. As you can see, it's just the text that we have put, nothing else. Let's close the terminal. First, we'll design the hero section and specifically navbar inside the hero section. So I want to keep the text color different other than the black, and I want it to apply to all the sections. So I'll give the text color in this app.view, and that would be the pink color, but with the darkest shade on Tailwind CSS, that is pink 950. So now all these sections will have the pink text by default. Now let's close this and open the hero section. First, we'll create a main container and we'll give the height of screen, and we'll make it flex container and use flex call so that the items are vertically distributed. So on the top we will have navbar with some space, and all the remaining space will be occupied by the hero section. So let's create a navbar. In this we will have the brand name here, that is Go Jaipur. Below this we'll have the nav links, and after this we will have a call to action button. We'll call it book now. Let's see the output now. So we have the text, but since we did not style much, it doesn't look like a navbar. So let's add the styling now. For the background, I want to keep an image of Jaipur, so let me add image as a background using bg, then square brackets, and then URL of the link, and we will use bg cover and bg center so that the image perfectly aligns to the container and the image is in the center position. So bg cover and then bg center. Now let's have a look. Let's design the navbar container. So we'll make it a flex container, and we want it to occupy the full width, and the item should be center so that vertically align, and then we use justify between to spread across the edges. So the first element will be on the extreme left, the last element will be on the extreme right, and this will be exactly in the middle. And I'll give a height of 20 for this. Now let's go back and see how it looks. So we have the navbar aligned correctly, and we have this background image. Now let's add some gradient so that this image is not appearing like this and we see only part of the image with some transparency. So above the navbar, we'll create an absolute div. We can use a self-closing tag if we don't want any content there. So I'll use that, and we'll give an absolute positioning, and I'll give the inset 0 so it occupies the entire height and width of its container. And then we'll give the gradient background. So it would be from bottom left to top right direction. We can use bg gradient to top right. And then I want to use the pink colors. So from pink, I'll use a light shade, and then I use via. If we don't use via, then you can see almost how I will show how it looks without via. It's better to show directly. And then towards pink 50, the lightest color for pink, and I want this to be 50% transparent, so we can see that image there on the top right. Now I'll save this and let's see now on the top right we have the image slightly, and this is where the 50% cut it is transitioning from 200 to 100 and then to 50. If we don't give this, we will not have a solid space here. The image will occupy a bit more space and I don't want that. Let me show how it looks. If I remove this via code, see now we have the image almost till here. Let's add them back. And if you observe, the navbar is beneath this. Since this has an absolute positioning, it's on the top. And remember, whenever you give absolute, it generally takes its parent where it has relative container, but this is the topmost element and it is working because it is the topmost element, and even though we did not give it, but it's a good practice to always give the relative so that the absolute will take the position of its relative element. And now we can use the z-index to put the navbar on top. We'll give the z-index of 0 to this, and then we'll add z-index of 10, which is above 0, to the navbar. And let's add some styling to the items inside this before we see the output. So for the brand link, we'll just use the to Excel. If you want to try with some image, you can replace this brand name with some image, and I'll give font bold. And then for the navbar, I'll use flex and then item center to vertically align them correctly, and then I'll give a gap of 6. And for each link here, I'll add some classes. So I want them to be bold because on pink background, pink text, it has to have some weight, otherwise it may not appear correctly. And on hover, I want to just add some underline, and also the underline offset. Also I want to give some offset to the underline, so underline offset 4, for example. Now let's save this, and let's also design the button. We'll give a pink background, 700. Then we'll add padding vertically 2 points and horizontally 4 points, and we will make it rounded with medium. And the font inside will be semi bold, and the text would not be white. On pink background, which is dark with 700 weight, white would look good, but when you use certain colors, and if you use very light version of that color for the text, you may not notice the change immediately, but when you look overall, you will have that feel of having some consistency across the design. So wherever possible, try to use that. It may not apply for every situation, but it definitely applies here. And on hover, I want the background to slightly lighten so that you know that the cursor is there. So for that, I'll use pink 600. Let's save now and see how it looks. I think padding is missing for this page. Apart from that, I get the look that I want. So let's add some padding to this. Here, I'll add a padding in the X direction of 6. Now it's okay. Now let's collapse this navbar and let's do the hero section. So we'll create a container for this hero section, and then we use flex so that on the left side we have the text content and on the right side we have the images. So I'll use flex and item center and also justify center. Justify center may not be that necessary because we will be giving a width of 1 by 2 1 by 2, and inside this let's have our text content. I'll again create another div for the text containers and give the heading, and then some paragraph. Let me copy some text about Jaipur, and below this let's create another call to action button. We'll say that plan your trip. Now let's design these. So I want them to be aligned vertically, so I'll give flex and then flex call utility. Then I'll make the items start from the left, so I'll use items start. Just to refresh, item start works based on the direction of the flex. So if you don't use flex call, the items would be on the top. So if you use flex call, then the items would be on the left. So the start position is based on the direction if it is a row or column. And then let's add some gap between these elements. And for the heading, we'll make the text look so big, 6 pixel. And then now font would be semi bold. And for Jaipur, we will design something separately. So we will add a span and design Jaipur's word separately so that it is highlighted. Let's just add an underline to keep it simple. So underline, but with some offset of 8 because the text is big. And for the paragraph, we'll add some extra margin in the bottom so that there is more space between the CTA and paragraph than heading and this. There are some concepts in UI UX design. I don't want to go into technical terms, but the gap between these two and these two should be different to show the relativity of the content. So here the heading and the paragraph goes together. We are telling about Jaipur and then we are describing something about Jaipur. So these two go together, and then a little less relevance on the button compared to these two. So slight margin on the bottom differentiates this slightly, but still keep them together. That's why this extra margin bottom of 2. And we can just copy the same CTA style like in the navbar, collapse this and give it for the plan your trip, but we will make this slightly bigger. So we'll give padding x direction 6 and y it's going to be 3, and we'll give also a shadow effect on hover. So shadow, I'll give 2 XL, and I'll give it on hover. And I'll also add a color to the shadow, 600. Now let's see how it looks. Okay, obviously it is behind this text, so let's add just z index to this. And if you can see from the screen, the text is on the top, we want it bottom, so we'll give justify between for the entire page so that this item comes in the middle. So first we'll add the z index so that the text is on the top. Now we will make it come to the bottom by using the justify between on the main container. This is the main flex container, and here we will use the justify between. Let's save it. Now it's in the extreme bottom, but we don't want that. So what we will do is create another container in here and give a flex utility called grow. So that particular container will occupy the entire space apart from this h20 that we gave to the navbar. So in this particular area, it will, again, we can apply flex properties to center this item. So we will have a navbar, then another container, and inside that container we have this hero section. So that way we can make this text and this button exactly in the center of the remaining space. So let's do that. I'll collapse this. Now let's add the container that I talked about. I'll put the hero section inside that, and I'll give the z index to that container. And as I said, we'll use the flex properties and use grow so that it occupies the entire space. And again, we will use the item center so that they are vertically aligned. But now we have only one item. Now let's create the another div where we will keep the images. We'll make this a flex container again. And we'll use item center and justify center to center this content of images. And we will make these two elements occupy half space by using width 1/2. So in this container, I'll give some comment here to understand. So main container. So in this particular container, we have two elements. This is the hero section and this is for the images. We will give width 1/2 to both these elements so that this occupies the left section and the images occupy the right section. And in the right section, inside this, we'll create a grid for the images to show. So we will give the path of the image in the source folder and give some alt name for that. I'll use the exact name of the image. And then we will give some classes. So let's give a width of 56 and height of 64 to this image. And we'll make it rounded extra large. And we'll use object cover so that it perfectly fits inside the container. Let's save this. So we have the image on the right and we have this on the left, and see on hover you have the shadow. Now let's add the other two images. So I've just added two more images with different links and different alt names for them, but everything else is same. Now let's have a look. Now what we will do is we will create a grid container here and we'll give two columns so that there will be two images on the left side and one image on the right side, and we'll use different width and height for the last item so that the left two items look smaller and the right item looks bigger. let's see how we can achieve that. So to the container with all the images, let's make it a grid container, and we'll give a grid rows, but we will define the direction of the grid items using the grid flow column. So in this way, we will have two rows, and then when the space is not enough in the first row, then it automatically goes to the next column because of the grid flow column. So if I delete the grid flow column just to demonstrate you, if I save this, you see nothing changed because it doesn't have a direction to go when the space is not enough. So if I use the grid flow column, then it goes to the next column. So that's the use of grid flow call. Now what I want to do is to place them in the center, and for that we use the place content center, and also we'll use the place item center. So as a whole it is in the center, and also individual items are in its center position. And we will add some gap between these images, a gap of 8. Let's save it. Now we have a normal grid exactly aligned like how it should be. Now what we will do here is to give row span of 2 for the third item and give a different height and width for it. And then we will add the animations to these images so that when the page loads, they will give that scaling animation. So let's see how we can achieve that. First, let's add the row span. And change the width and height of this. I'll keep the width 64 and then height of 80. Let's have a look. See, now it is occupying the row span of 2, means it's occupying the space of 2 rows, and we used place item center, and that's why it is in the center position and not in the start position. So that's why we use the place item center, and we have given different height and width, so it looks bigger than these two. Now let's add animation so that they scale up with some opacity when the page loads. Generally, this animation can only be done with CSS. Tailwind does not have like inbuilt animation classes for this kind of animation. It only has 4 types of basic animations like pulse, some bounce, but it doesn't have any customization, and we still have to use the keyframes of CSS to create animations. There is a way to use these keyframes inside the Tailwind config in by making changes in the extent. For this tutorial, I think maybe this is a bit complicated, so I'll just leave it for now. Just know that we can do this keyframe animation in the Tailwind CSS config, but for this kind of animation I don't think that is necessary since we use it only in the landing page. If you are doing some repetitive animations throughout the project, then it's a better idea to use the Tailwind config. We will cover that concept in a different video dedicated to that specific concept. Now let's add some keyframes. So we'll create the style and we'll use the scope. So if you're not from Vue.js, this style scope means the styles that we write here are applicable only to this particular component, that is hero section.view. So whatever you write here, it will not apply to other components. That is the point of using the scope. So we'll use the keyframes and we'll give a name called scale fade. And then what we will define here is at a percentage how we want to transform this object. So at 0%, I want this to have a scale of 0 and opacity of 0. So I'll use transform and I'll use the scale of 0, and then the opacity will also be 0. So we'll copy this and paste it 3 times and change the percentages here. So I want to give 4 steps. So it will be at 50%, then 75%, and then 100%. You can decide these timelines where you want the keyframes to be. I want at the 0%, I want the scale to be 0 and opacity to be 0. And at 50%, I want the scale to be like 1.1 times of its actual scale. And then opacity will be 1 after that. So when it is growing, it starts from 0 and it becomes 1, and then it just stays 1. So we'll keep the opacity 1 after the 50% mark. And then to get that bouncy look, it has to increase its scale and then decrease slightly and then come to its original position. Now we have to use this scale fade to convert it into an animation, and there we will specify how much time the animation should take and any other options that we want to provide for that particular animation. So we have 3 images. So let's just use the image names like image animation 1, and here we will specify the animation, and we will use the scale fade keyframe that we created above, and we will define the length of the animation, that would be 1 second. And then we can also specify the ease in, ease out. I feel ease in out is better, it just creates a smooth finishing. And then I want a delay for image. If there is a delay, the first one comes at 1 second, then 1.2 seconds, then 1.4 seconds, like that. So let's have the first one grow immediately, and then we'll copy this and use for the second image. And I want the second image to start the animation after 0.2 seconds of the first one. So it is 0.2 seconds late. And then we'll do the same for the third image, and we'll make it 0.4 seconds late. Now let's go back and refresh this page. Nothing happens because we did not use this inside the class. So let's use it for the first image and for the second image and for the third image. Let's save it, and you see, but you see a small issue here. Before the animation, these two are still visible, but we don't want that. First, nothing we should be visible, then first one should start, and then it is followed by the second and third. So to fix that, let's go back to our CSS keyframes. I mean the animation here. We'll use a property called forwards. If you don't know these keywords, don't worry about it. So for now, just know that for this particular scenario, this works. And we will also give the opacity of 0 by default. So until this animation finishes, this second animation will not start, and by default it will have opacity of 0 until this animation is started. Let's just understand in a way like that. Now let's go back to the page and refresh. Now you see these two were not visible in the beginning. Now this looks better. So I think we are done with the hero section. For the discover section, we follow a similar template of the hero section. We'll have the heading and a paragraph on the top in the place of navbar, and then we will have another container in the bottom, and we'll give the grow utility to that, so it occupies the remaining space where we can show all the images. Let's see what I mean. So we'll create a main container, and we'll give the height of screen, and we'll make it a flex container and set the direction to vertical using flex call. And another important thing here is we used the background gradient here to top to right from pink via pink 100 to pink 50. Now what we will do is we will invert this gradient direction so that when we look in the output in the UI, it looks like the page is continuing including this gradient that we see. So let's do that. You will see how what I mean. So I'll copy this PG gradient and I'll paste it in the discover section, but instead of keeping it the direction towards the top right, we will make it bottom right. And we'll remove this transparency here because we don't have a background image here, so we don't need it. Now let's save it, and you see it looks like the same page. We have a gradient on the left. I'm not sure if you can see this on the YouTube screen, but the color is going light towards the top right, and in this the color is going light towards the bottom right. So now we have a gradient that looks like half is in the top page and half is in the second page. So that's something that I wanted to achieve. So let's start designing the discover section now. And we'll give some padding to this. First we'll create the heading which says discover Jaipur's hotspots, and then just some information about that. And now we will have the container that will occupy the entire space that is available. So we will use the class grow, and we'll use the flex container, and we'll keep the items vertically and horizontally centered. So for that we will use justify center and then item center. And in here we will create that div with all the images that we want to show. First we will create the one image to get the look we want, and then we copy paste it and replace the names and the image. So inside this we will create another div which is the container of the images, and then this is the actual div where we will keep the image, the name, and the hover effects and all. So here first we will add the image tag, and in the source we'll give the link, and in the alt you can give some name for that. I'll just use Jaipur, a common alt for everything, but generally you have to give what this image is about and keep it in the alt. So for the hover effect that you saw in the intro, where we hover the image, its size does not increase, but it's inside a div, and div has the overflow hidden, which makes the image scale, but on the screen you don't see that it is scaling. It's only the inside scaling and outside it's not scaling. So let's design that, you will understand it better. So for the main container that image is in, give width and height to that. I'll give width of 64 and height of 96, and I'll give the cursor pointer, and we will make this a group container. So when we hover on this entire image, we can apply something to the inside elements of this. So we'll use group for that, and we'll make it rounded. Now let's see how it looks. So we have just one image, and though we used rounded Excel, it is not working because we gave rounded Excel to the main div, and now this image is overflowing. So we have to use overflow hidden so that the image doesn't exceed that div. Now we will use this technique to hover on the group image, I mean this group div, and increase the scale of this image so that it looks expanding, but this border, it will not change, it will stay the same. And we'll give some classes to the image so that it aligns perfectly inside this container. So we'll give the object cover, and we'll use the group hover that I was talking about. Now when we hover on this group, we can give some action to this particular image. So when we hover this entire group, we want the image to scale big, so it's scaling to 110%. And by default, I want it to occupy the full width and height. And also for this group hover scale animation, I want it to uh, increase its scale slowly. So I can use some properties of Tailwind here to make it slow. That is using the transition transform. Means we are applying the transition properties to the transform animations here. So this scale is considered as the transform animation, so we use transition transform. And then we will set the duration. I'll give 1000, means 1000 milliseconds. I think it's just 1 second. And then we will use the ease in out to smooth the hovering, the scaling up animation. Now let's see how it looks. It's fitted inside this div container and it's occupying the full height and width. And when you hover on the group, you can see the image inside it scaled up slowly and with some easing, that smoothness. This is what we wanted to achieve with the image. Now we need another container on the top as a mask where we can see the name of this particular place. So for that, we'll create an absolute container. So if you remember in the first hero section, I've told we have to make the parent container relative if you want to apply the child element an absolute positioning. So I'll give the div an absolute positioning, and I'll make it occupy the full height and width by giving inside 0. And we'll make it a flex because we want the text to be at the bottom, so we will use the items end and justify center. Let's add the text. It's called the Hawa Mahal. Now you can see that there is the Hawa Mahal at the bottom, but it's not so visible. So let's add some gradient so that we can see it clearly. And we will see the text only when we hover on it, not by default. We will add a gradient to this container. That would be pg gradient to top, and the colors will be from pink 950, the darkest shade, but we'll give some transparency to that so that the background image is still appearing. And we will use two transparents, so it's going from bottom to top. So bottom there will be some 75% transparency, and on the top it's completely transparent. And we'll make the text color white to show on the background, and the text should be in the center. And we'll increase the size of the text and make it bold. And as I said, by default it should not appear, so we'll give an opacity of 0. And only when we hover, like group hover, then the opacity should increase to 100. Let's see how it looks now. So on hover, you don't see anything. I think it's because of the z index. So I think the image is overlapped. So let's add some z index to the absolute positioning so it comes on top of the image. I'll give z10, and now you can see that there is this gradient background, but it's not that effective. So here I want it to be dark in the beginning, so I'll use from 5%. And then I'll also add some padding so that there is some space between the edge and the text. So I'll use from 5% and some padding y of 4. Now you can see it's darker at the bottom and we have some padding. Now I'm okay with this. Now let's copy this and paste it multiple times so that we have 4 items. We'll see how it looks. Then we'll change the images and see how it looks. So I'll copy this container with relative positioning. Paste, paste, paste. I pasted 3 times. So now we have 4 images in total. But we have to style this parent container so that these items that we created now, they look neat. Now let's see, it will be in a single line. We don't see much. So we'll make it a flex container. Then we'll center the items horizontally and vertically, both. And then we'll give a gap of 12. And we can also add some padding on the y direction. Let's save this and see how it looks. So yeah, now we have these 4. Now let me change the images and the text here. Oh, and I almost forgot that we didn't style this. Okay, I'll change the images and come back to this. I'll expand all these. Okay, I'm done changing the names and the links. Let's see how it looks. Yes, so we have the famous Hava Mahal, then Amber Palace. It's an ancient sundial, and we have some local market it's famous for. Now let's design this heading. We'll set the text to 4 XL and we'll add some margin to that in the bottom, and we'll make it semi bold. For the paragraph, I don't think we need anything, so let's see. Okay, I'm okay with this. Now if you remember in the demo, we didn't have this in the exact alignment. We had a pattern where I changed the y direction and translated it to up and down, so it looks like a zigzag. So let's do that now. For that, we use the utility called translate y. So for this, use the translate on the parent container of the image. So this is the image and this relative is the parent container. Let's collapse these and just give some comments. So for the first one, let's use the translate y, and I'll just keep 6 as the value. Now let's see how it changes. See, now it is translated by 6 point, means in the y direction from its original position, it's 6 points down from that original position. Now we will add 6 to this, but in the opposite direction. Now, so this translate yx, let's copy that. And for the second image, we'll give a negative value, means minus, and then translate yx. So it goes up. Same way we will do for both these. For the third one, we'll give the positive value. And for the fourth one, we'll give the negative value. So that's how we get this look. I think we are finished with the second page. Now let's go to the third section, that is the subscribe section. We'll create a main container in which we will have two sections. One would be the section where we ask the people to subscribe for the offers, and the second would be the footer. So let's design the main container. We'll make it flex and use flex call so that subscribe is on the top and then the footer is at the bottom. And again, we'll use the gradient background just like the zigzag pattern. In the first file, we have this gradient directed towards the top right. Then in the second file, we have the bottom right. And then again, the third file will put the top right so that they all look like a single background with some gradient. So let's copy this and paste it in the subscribe and change the direction of the gradient. Now let's see. Now we have the top right here in the first one, then second it's towards the bottom right, so we have a gradient, connecting gradient here between these two pages, and the same thing happens in the third page as well. Okay, we did not give the full height to this. Now you can see this looks like a intersection and we have the dark gradient on the left. I'm just trying to make you understand my design perspective when I'm doing something, so that you learn Tailwind and also web design in the process. So let's design the subscribe section. We'll create a header with our call to action, subscribe for exclusive offers. And then we'll create a paragraph explaining that, and we'll style the heading. Now we'll make it 6XL, and I want it to be semi bold, and the text should be in the center. And for the paragraph, I want the text to be in the center as well. Let's see how it looks. But I don't want the text to occupy this much space, so I can use the max width utility, and I'll give the 2XL unit. So now it doesn't occupy the full space, it just occupies this much, but it is not centered, so let's fix that. This is the container that is having the subscribe section, so let's arrange this. I'll give flex and then item center and then justify center, and I'll add some gap between these with 6 units, and I have to make it flex call. Now the logic that we applied to the hero section, where navbar occupies certain space and all the remaining space is occupied by the hero section, we'll do the same here, but we will invert the elements. Here footer will occupy a certain space and this subscribe will occupy the entire space. So we'll give the grow utility to this container. So we'll use grow here, and this should occupy the entire space, giving footer some minimum that it's required. Now let's design that input box where user can enter the email address. We'll create a div here. So the process for this is, we'll create an input box in the middle without any background, and we will give the background to the main container so it looks like a big input box with an email icon on the left side and also some call to action on the right side. Let me copy an SVG. So I'm pasting an SVG, that is the mail icon, and I've given the size of 6. Then we will have the actual input, which type is mail, and we'll give the class, we'll make the outline none. So when we focus on that, we don't see that border. Let me show you. Now I'll just save like this, and see that when you click on this, you have this black background, which I don't want, which because it doesn't align with the design requirements of this particular page. So we'll deal with that, we'll fix that. And then finally we have a call to action button called subscribe. Now first we will arrange the positions of this. So we'll make it a flex container, and we will vertically align the center items using item center, and we'll give a gap of 4 for each element, and we'll make the background white, and also give some padding. I'll give maybe 4. Let's see how it is. So what I want to do now is to add some padding in the y direction as well to this, and make this fully rounded, and give some padding to the input box in the middle as well, and remove this outline from this input, and style the subscribe button, of course. So for the input element, I'll give padding y of 2, and then the text should be bigger, and then the outline should not be there, so outline none. And for the subscribe button, we'll give the darkest color, pink 950. We'll make it fully rounded. We'll give a padding y and also padding x, and we'll make the text on that pink but the lightest color. And on hover, the background changes to pink 900. And we have to make this whole container also rounded full, so we use rounded full. Now let's see the look. This is how I wanted it, but seems like there is some extra padding here, so we will remove this padding, and here we can add some padding on the left, so this email icon is further into this div. So let's fix that. For the email icon, I'll add the padding left of 6, so the email icon is moved slightly to the right. And for the subscribe button, I will just make the px 2. So by default, the px will be 2, which fixes the subscribe button on the right, and pl6 will fix the one on the left. So we have an even spacing between the button and the container, and here the email icon is slightly to the right, which looks perfectly aligned. Now what I want is, when I hover on this, I want the border to appear for this particular div. Before it appeared for this only this input box, but I want user to consider this entire element as the input. So I'll highlight the border of this when the user clicks here on the input box. So let's see how we can do that. So the property that we should use for this is called focus within. So what we do is, we will create a group for the child items inside this element. We will create a group for the elements inside, and then we use the focus within utility. What this does is, it checks if the items inside this group is being focused somewhere. So, and since the input inside this group will be focused, and when it focuses, we will add the border pink 950. And of course we should have the border by default, and we will make it transparent. So by default there is a border and it is transparent, and when we focus, we'll get the border color to pink 950, which makes it look like the input box is being highlighted. Let's see. it's better to give some kind of hint to the user so that they can enter the email here. So we'll just add a placeholder to the input. Enter your email, or maybe just your email here. Okay, I'm fine with this. Now user knows that it is clickable, and he or she can enter the email address there. Now let's design the footer component. So below this we have the footer here. We'll make it a flex container, and then we can replicate this by using the navbar. We'll just copy this h2 and then these nav items, and we will paste it inside this flex container for the footer. And we will also copy this nav items and paste it again to create another set of nav links. So let's design this first. So the container will be flex and it occupies the full width. And then we will use the justify between to spread the elements. Now we will change the items in this nav links. We'll change the names of those links. Generally, travel websites offer some kind of tools so that if somebody wants to come from outside that country, they can estimate the expenses. So that's why I'm putting a converter here. Even though I do tutorials, to explain Tailwind CSS, I still try to keep some kind of sense. I still try to put some kind of sense into the website. So I think every item should be somehow relevant to the thing that we are building. That's why I'm using the relevant links and not just some links. And I'll change these as well. And we'll give a headings to these divs. The first one could be just like explore more, and then this particular nav items could be a list of destinations. So we will add that heading as well. I'm from Hyderabad, by the way. I mean, I currently work in Hyderabad. So we'll create a div and we'll keep it inside this, and we'll create a heading inside this div so that the nav items and the heading are together. We'll put explore more, and I'll give a margin bottom so that the heading is on the top, and then we have the items of the nav links below the heading, and I'll make the heading bold. Now I'll copy this and create another container for the nav items below, paste the heading, and keep this nav inside that container. I'll save and change the heading here, other destinations. Now let's see how it looks. Okay, we have to fix these, and we will add the social links on the right side. So we'll remove this hover effect, and we'll make it semi bold and not bold. And we'll make it flex call. And we will use the item start so that the items are aligned to the start, and remove the item center. We will add some padding to this page so that they don't touch the screens. So we'll add a padding of 12 to this page. and now they are not touching the screens. Now let's add the social links. So this is the container. Inside we have the brand, we have two set of nav links, and then below this we'll create another div with the social links. I'll copy the SVGs I found, not found, kind of created to match the color of this website. Paste this and collapse this, and I'll use flex and item center and give a gap of 4 between them. It looks good, but I think all these items should be aligned to the top. So let's fix that. And there is too much gap between the items because of this navbar design. So let's just delete that. So this is the container that has the nav links, the social icons, and the brand name. So here we will use the item start, and now they are aligned to the start position, and there is less space between the nav items, and it looks clean. I think we are done with the desktop version. Let's have a look. So we have a nav bar with nav links and then the CTA button. We refresh. We have this animation, and we have this CTA button. Then go to the next section, the hotspots, they all work. Then the last section, which has this effect and also this footer, which are properly aligned. I think this is more than enough. Now let's design the mobile version first and then the tablet version as well. So this is how it looks on a mobile screen at the moment. My plan to this hero section is to actually hide the nav items and the CTA button. I don't want it to appear at all on the mobile screen. Generally, I would have done it differently by adding a burger icon and giving an on-click event and then show the nav items in a specific way. But I don't want to use JavaScript in this tutorial, so you can just hide it on small screens and you can make it visible on the bigger screens. And the way we do it is using the hidden utility. So for the nav links, you can use the hidden utility, and then to show it on a specific screen, you can use that breakpoint, for example, Excel, and you can use flex or block to make it appear. So it's hidden on mobile screen and it appears on the bigger devices. Let's save this. So I just want to refresh a topic here. Tailwind's approach is mobile first approach, means whatever the code that you write, Tailwind thinks that it is for the mobile version that you wrote first, but we actually wrote the code for the desktop version. Let me give you a small example to understand that concept. So by default, you give the code that it assumes to be for mobile, and then you add a breakpoint MD, for example, and you want it to be text3XL. Then you add another breakpoint, and on extra large devices, you want it to be 4XL. So this is the normal way. We first design for mobile, then for medium devices, and then for the extra large devices. But we already designed for the desktop. So in that case, you would keep this for the extra large device, and then you write what you want for the mobile version. So that's the difference. We are doing it in the opposite way. So I just gave this example so you are clear on that point. So now we have hid this navbar. Now let's hide the CTA button as well. As I said, we can use block to make it appear. So for Excel devices, I'll keep it visible, and I don't want that on mobile screen. Now let's collapse this. Now we have the main container which holds the hero section on the left and images on the right. Now we will apply the flex call reverse utility so that these images will come on the top and this text will be on the bottom in the so we'll write flex call reverse. What happens if you use flex call is the text will be on the top because that's the first element inside this container. So if you write flex call reverse, it happens the opposite way, and the second element will be on the top and the first one will be in the last. But you want on the big screen, you still want it to be flex row. So that's done. Now both these containers are using width or 50% width, so we'll make it for large screens, and by default we want it to occupy the full width. And now let's adjust the text size in the hero section. So I want text 6XL to apply on extra large devices, and by default I want only text 3XL. And now the underline offset seems to be way below the text, so we will reduce the offline offset. I want underline offset of 4 to be on mobile devices, and on Excel I want it to be 8. So let's save, and now it's fixed. And the text, I want it to be small on mobile devices, on extra large devices, or just from the medium devices. I can use SM for small devices and use text base. Now Tailwind offers 5 breakpoints by default. We'll have the default version, the mobile version without any breakpoint. Then we have small, which is more than 640 pixels. Then we have medium, 768 pixels. Then we have large, 1024 pixels. XL, that's 1280 pixels, I think. And then double XL means 2XL, it's 1536 pixels and more. So small is for something like a small tablet. So anything that's bigger than a normal mobile, I want the text to be the default size. And I'll also reduce this gap between these elements. So gap 6 should be for big devices and gap 4 should be for the mobiles. Okay, that's fixed. Now what I want to do is to reduce the size of these images so that they fit to this mobile screen. And let me add some padding to this text content so they are not towards the edge and there is some gap between them. So for that I can add to the main hero section container, which has all these CTA buttons and the text content. I'll add padding y of 0, but sorry, padding y of 10, but on more big screens I don't want any padding, so I'll keep 0. So now we have some space at the bottom and on the top. Now we will adjust the sizes of the images. First, I don't want this much gap between them, so I'll add gap of 4 for mobile, and then for Excel devices 8. And the sizes we can change. So for the first image and the second image, we'll keep the same sizes because they already have the same height and width. So we have to make them Excel, and we have to give the original size for mobile versions now. And I will use size 28. Whenever you want to give height and width same to some element, you can use size instead of writing H and W again. So for small screens, size 28, and then slightly larger screens, I want the size to be 48. And let's adjust the height and width for the big image on the right as well. So this would be for the extra large devices, and for mobile I want it to be 32 width, and then height would be 40. And for tablets, probably height of 64, and then weight of 48. I'm not showing the tablet version preview now. We will only stick to the mobile version and do correctly. Then at last we will check if everything is okay in tablet and we will make the changes. Instead of switching back and forth, it's better to finish one and then go for another one. Now it seems like this is not occupying the full space. So let's see what we can do about that. Let's collapse the inside containers and keep the main containers open. So this is the main container for hero section. This is for images, and this is the container that holds both of them. Let's see which one is responsible for this. In some cases where you don't understand which item that I should change to get the required look, you can use the developer tools. You can click on this arrow icon and see how the items are spread across. Now you can see that there is some empty space in this element. So what is this element? You can click on this, and in the element section here it will show. So this is the div that has the z10 flex call reverse. So this is the container. Sorry, this is the container, the main container that has the hero section and images in it. So it is not distributing the items properly. Now we have only flex. We are using item center, but we are not justifying it. That's why it's in the default position. This is actually start position, but we used flex call reverse, so it is in the reverse position and showing it as end position. So what we will do is add justify center. Okay, now it's in the middle, but I don't like the look. What I'll do is use the justify between and make this on big screens justify normal, because we don't want justify between to apply on other devices, other screens. So let's not forget that whenever we make some changes for the mobile version, try to do it for the desktop version as well. Otherwise we might have to check again and work again on fixing that. So now let's check what we can do later. Now it's using the between, but it's not occupying the entire space. So let's see that we can make this container and this container occupy full height, and let's see how much it can occupy. So we'll use h full on both. Okay, now it's occupying full space and it's in the center position. So now we have some kind of gap there. This is okay, but I still want this to be at the bottom. So what I will do is here, this container, I want the items to be at the end. So for extra large device, it's item center, but by default, I want it to be items end. So now we have this at the bottom and we have this on the top. Don't worry about this gap that we have. So if we have something like a safe space here, even if the mobile size becomes smaller, this would still look good. But if we put bigger images, for example here on a smaller screen, these images might be cut off. For example, let's see for a 320 pixel here. So since we have smaller images even on the smallest mobile, according to this device toolbar, we still have the images correctly fit inside the mobile. Otherwise they will not align correctly and parts of the image might not appear on small devices. So don't worry about that. Just understand the process and practice it, and you will understand on what devices you have to make changes in the future if you want. So I'll just leave them like that. If you want, you can still increase the size of this. You know already how to do that. For example, this one, just for you, I'll just add. Now you see the first one is bigger and this look is actually good. We can keep it like that. So that's all with the hero section. So in this section, I don't think we need to make any changes to the heading and the paragraph. If you want and want to maintain the same like this, we can actually make this small text, like text small by default, and from medium devices, sorry, small devices, it can be the base text. And we should also remove the padding. If you see, it's not consistent across the screens. So padding 12 would be for extra large, and by default we can make it padding 6. Now they are aligned. And if you want, you can add some more padding on the top, but this is okay. Now we'll make the images position vertically instead of horizontal direction. So here, where all the images are there, let's collapse this so it's clear. This is the container that has all these images with the flex property. So we want on extra large devices flex row, but on mobile devices it has to be flex call. So now we have all this, but because of the translate y, it's not properly spaced. The spacing is not correct, so we'll adjust that. And also we have hide screen, that's why it's overflowing to the another component. So let's fix that. We can just use minimum head screen. Otherwise, if you want to be specific, you can use for extra large devices it has to be head screen, and you can just leave it without specifying anything, and it will just occupy the full space that it requires. Now let's change this translate y's. So this translate yx, you want this to apply only on extra large devices. So for this kind of scenarios, you don't need to write, for example, translate y0, and then for extra large devices translate yx. If you don't, if it is 0 means which is the default position, you don't need to mention it specifically. Even if you remove it, by default it's 0, so it doesn't matter. It only takes into account of the translate y only if it is on Excel device. So we can just add Excel in front of these utilities. They take place only in the big screen. So let's add the translate Excel to this as well, then here as well, and then for the whole fourth image as well. So now these are properly spaced. For mobile this is okay, but we can still follow that zigzag pattern for the tablets. So let's do that. I'll just use the tablet here. So what I want is for mobile there was less space on the left and right, so we just removed all the zigzag pattern. But on tablet we have some space, and we can use that same pattern, but instead of y direction we can use the x direction. Let me show you what I mean. So on mobile device we don't want anything, so I will write translate x0. But for small devices, means for devices which has 640 pixels and above, I want the translate x to be 24 points. Now if you save, you see that the first image is towards right, but I want this only on the tablet and not on any other device. On big screens I don't want x translate because we already have the y translate. So again I have to write Excel, and I have to keep translate x 0. So on the mobile it's 0, on the tablet it's 24, and again on the desktops it is 0. Now let's apply the same to the other items. We'll just copy this and we will paste it here, but instead we will use the negative value for the 24, just like before the alternate patterns. Same thing for the third image, the positive value, and for the fourth image a negative value. So on mobile it looks straight, but on tablets it has this alternating zigzag pattern, And again, on big screens, we have the zigzag pattern, but in the y direction and not x direction. Let's go back to our mobile version now. Now let's do the subscribe section. Let's close this discover. So what we can do in this section is to reduce the size of this text, then reduce the width of this input box, and then make this columns positioned in columns instead of in a row, and center the items instead of in the start position. So let's start with the subscribe text. We want this 6XL to be on big screens, and on small screens I just want 4XL, and we'll see if the text can occupy a bit more or less space and if it looks good. So max width XL, and on extra large screens 2XL. I think it did not change, so yeah, we can just keep it that way. Then for the input box, this is the class. We'll try probably 48 width. Okay, it's slightly smaller. I think this is good for this screen. So we want width 40 by default, but on bigger devices from small breakpoint, we want the width to be auto, so it just takes the default space. And here this mail icon looks too much to the right. On big screen it was okay, but on small screen it could go slightly to the left. So I can reduce this padding left. So on small screen I want padding left of 4, and only on large screens I want the padding left of 6. Now I'm satisfied with this. Then for the footer, so this is the container which has the nav items, social links, and the brand name. So here we will convert this into flex call instead of flex row. So we'll use flex call, and for extra large devices, or maybe just small devices, we can have the flex row. I don't think it will occupy that much space. So this is okay for mobile flex call, and for the devices larger than that, flex row. And instead of item start, this we will keep for the small, and by default we want item center, so they are all in the center, and also the text to be center. So text center, but for small other devices it has to be the default one, which is the left. So now we have positioned the main elements inside this. Now we have to fix the nav links. Here also we have the item start, so we have to make them only from small, and we can add some gap here. Okay, it's better. And the same for the second set of links. For from small devices and on, it's item start. By default it's item center, and gap of 1. And now we will create some gap between these items, like the social, nav bars, and the brand name. So this is the element. We'll give gap of 10, and for small devices and more it's gap of 0. Now it looks really clean. That's the look I wanted. Let's have a look again, the entire website. So we have the homepage, which looks really clean. We have some space here. Let's see how they are aligned. So probably we can make this flex container. Here we are using flex, item center, and justify center. Maybe we can use the justify end so it comes to the bottom. Let's see. So this is the container, and it is horizontally and vertically aligned to the center. Now I want this to be center on Excel devices, but on mobile I want it to be in the end. Okay, now there is the space is less. It's not so much as before. We have even spacing in the bottom and on the top. We have some spacing on the left as well. We can actually increase the size of these images, but as I said in the earlier, if you go to a smaller screen, then the space is actually enough. So I don't recommend to change it. Otherwise, you have to create a custom breakpoint in Tailwind for the screen sizes that are 320 pixels. You can give certain size, and then for 400 pixels you can give certain dimensions. It's a complicated process. Let's keep at this for now. And the second page looks good, and the third page also looks good. Let's see this on a different device. Let's see how it looks on iPad. There is some space here. You can try adjusting that as a practice. And the second page looks good, and the last page also looks good. Let's see the desktop version in full screen. We have the animation, we have the navbar and CTA button on top. We have all these zigzag puzzles correctly applied, and we have this section also perfectly applied. So here is the responsive design mockup of what we have created for mobile, tablet, and desktop versions. I hope you learned something from this video. Your feedback means a lot, so please share your thoughts on how you liked this video in the comment section. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to connect with me on social media, where you get quick responses to your questions. You can request for videos and stay updated. Thank you for watching, and happy coding.